a mother and her son in 1925. Experts analyze the photo and are speechless. The window reflection shows camera technology that wouldn't exist for another 15 years. The boy hides a metal object with mysterious coded symbols. But who were these people really? And why did they vanish without a trace that same year? A mother and her son in 1925. Experts looked at the photo and couldn't believe what they saw. Dr. Sarah Mitchell put on her reading glasses. She was looking through old boxes at the Smithsonian Museum. These boxes came from the Henderson family in Chicago. Inside all the dusty papers and old things, one photo caught her eye. The black and white picture was from 1925. It showed a woman in her 30s standing next to a 12-year-old boy. They were dressed in their best clothes, standing in front of a small house in Chicago. They looked very formal, like people did back then. But Sarah noticed something strange in the background. Behind the woman's left shoulder, in the window of the house, there was a reflection that didn't look right for that time period. She grabbed her magnifying glass. Her heart started beating faster as she looked at this weird detail. The picture was very clear for a 1925 photo. As she studied it more, she saw that the boy's hand was covering something on his jacket. It looked like he was hiding something on purpose. "This can't be right," Sarah whispered to herself. She was getting excited because she realized what she might be looking at. This photo that seemed normal at first was starting to show secrets. Secrets that could change everything they knew about this family. Sarah's hands shook a little as she put the photo under a powerful microscope at the museum. What she saw made her question everything she knew about old cameras from the 1920s. The reflection in the window showed someone taking the photograph. But the camera in the reflection was way too fancy for 1925. Cameras like that didn't exist back then. Even more interesting was the boy's jacket. Under the microscope, Sarah could see his small hand was hiding a small metal object pinned to his jacket. This object had tiny markings on it. The markings had symbols that didn't match any badges or pins from that time. The mother's face looked pleasant at first, but when Sarah looked closer, the woman seemed worried. Her eyes looked like she was hiding something important. Sarah picked up the phone to call her friend, Professor James Rodriguez. He knew a lot about old cameras and photos. "James, I need you to come to the lab right now. I found something that doesn't make sense." While she waited for him, Sarah couldn't stop thinking about this family photo. She felt like this simple picture was about to solve a mystery that had been hidden for almost 100 years. Professor Rodriguez came to the museum within an hour. Sarah's urgent voice had made him very curious. He looked through the microscope at the photograph. His face changed from doubt to complete confusion. "The camera we can see in this reflection," he said slowly, "shouldn't exist for another 15 years. And look at the lighting. This photo shows flash techniques that weren't available until the late 1930s. Sarah pointed to the object the boy was hiding. "And there's this. Whatever he's covering has some kind of coded markings. I've never seen anything like it from that time." They decided to use the museum's computer software to make the hidden details clearer without hurting the original photo. While the computers worked on the image, Sarah started researching the Henderson family. The paperwork said the photograph belonged to Margaret Henderson. She had died at age 97 in 2019. Margaret's granddaughter, Emily Henderson Walsh, gave the family collection to the museum after her grandmother died. The back of the photo had writing that said Mother and Thomas, 1925 in Margaret's handwriting. "We need to talk to Emily Henderson Walsh," Sarah told James. "If anyone has answers about this photo and this family, it would be her. I think this picture holds secrets that Margaret never told anyone." Emily Henderson Walsh came to the museum 2 days later. She was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and gray hair. When Sarah showed her the enhanced images, Emily's face turned white. "I never knew Grandma Margaret had this photo," she whispered, looking at the image of the woman and boy. "But that's not my grandmother in the picture." Sarah and James looked at each other with surprise. "What do you mean?" Sarah asked gently. Emily took a shaky breath. "The woman in this photo, that's my great-great-grandmother, Helen Henderson. She disappeared in 1925 when my grandmother, Margaret, was just 14 years old. The family always said Helen left them, but Margaret never believed it. She spent her whole life trying to find out what really happened to her mother." Emily pointed to the boy. "And that must be Thomas, Margaret's younger brother. He disappeared the same day as Helen." The room became very quiet as everyone realized what this meant. This wasn't just a family photo. It might be one of the last pictures ever taken of two people who vanished without a trace almost 100 years ago. Emily continued, her voice very quiet. "Margaret always said there was more to the story. She believed her mother and brother were in some kind of danger, but no one ever listened to her. She kept looking for answers until the day she died. When the computer results came back, the mysterious object under Thomas's hand became clearer. It was a small metal pin, but the symbols on it were like nothing they had ever seen before. The markings were numbers and shapes arranged in a specific pattern. James knew right away it was some kind of code. "This isn't just decoration," he said, pointing at the pattern on the computer screen. "This is on purpose. Someone wanted this information saved but hidden." Sarah called Dr. Marcus Webb, a code expert at Georgetown University. She sent him clear pictures of the pin's markings. Meanwhile, Emily shared more family history. Margaret always said her mother Helen was involved in something important before she disappeared. Helen worked making clothes, but Margaret remembered her staying up late at night, writing letters and having quiet phone conversations. When Helen and Thomas vanished, all of Helen's personal things disappeared too. Her letters, her photos, everything. Dr. Webb called back within hours. He sounded very excited. "The symbols on that pin," he said, "they match coded communication systems used by women's voting groups and civil rights groups in the 1920s. But this particular combination is different. I've never seen anything quite like it. It's more complex than typical codes from that time." This meant Helen Henderson was involved in something much more organized and potentially dangerous than anyone knew. Dr. Webb's findings opened a whole new path for investigation. Sarah spent the next week looking through files of women's voting organizations that were active in Chicago during the 1920s. Even though women got the right to vote in 1920, many activists kept working in secret on civil rights, worker rights, and social justice causes that were still controversial and sometimes dangerous. In the Chicago Historical Society files, Sarah found records of a group called the Silent Sisters. This was a secret organization of women who worked to protect activists and their families from threats and violence. The group operated between 1921 and 1927, helping move people whose civil rights work had put them in danger. The organization used a complex system of codes and symbols to communicate safely. Emily had been going through Margaret's personal things more carefully. In an old jewelry box, she found a small piece of paper tucked behind the soft lining. On it was written, "Helen Henderson, Chicago 1925, Protection Protocol 7, Thomas Safe." The handwriting was faded but still readable. When Sarah saw the note, her heart raced. Protection Protocol 7 suggested Helen and Thomas hadn't disappeared by choice. They had been moved somewhere safe. The photo might not show a family portrait, but rather proof of their last day before entering a protection program. The fancy camera technology could be explained if the photo was taken by someone with advanced equipment, maybe law enforcement or government agents involved in the relocation. Sarah's theory about government involvement led her to contact the National Archives. She asked to see previously secret documents from the 1920s. What she discovered shocked everyone involved in the investigation. Helen Henderson's name appeared in federal records as someone who gave important information about organized crime in Chicago during Prohibition. When alcohol was illegal, criminals made a lot of money selling it illegally. The documents showed that Helen had been working undercover. She used her job making clothes to gather information about illegal alcohol operations and their connections to corrupt city officials. Her work was so valuable that when her cover was blown in early 1925, the federal government made the unusual decision to relocate both her and her son, Thomas, to protect them from revenge. The advanced camera equipment visible in the photo's reflection now made perfect sense. It belonged to federal agents who were taking pictures of Helen and Thomas Sodomy before they moved them to safety. The photograph was official proof of their entry into one of the earliest witness protection programs in American history. Emily was amazed by these discoveries. "So Margaret was right all along," she said with tears streaming down her face. "Her mother didn't abandon the family, she was protecting them by leaving." The coded pin Thomas wore contained coordinates and contact information for their new identities. Information that would allow Margaret to find them if she ever figured out the code. But the mystery wasn't solved yet. If Helen and Thomas had been successfully relocated, why had Margaret never been able to find them? And why had this photograph stayed hidden for so long? Further investigation revealed the heartbreaking truth about why Margaret never found her mother and brother. The witness protection program of the 1920s was rough and dangerous compared to modern systems. Records from the National Archives showed that Helen and Thomas had been moved to a small farming town in rural Montana. They used the fake names Helen and Thomas Morrison. For 3 years, the move seemed successful. Helen worked as a school teacher while Thomas went to the local school and helped on a nearby farm. They had no contact with their old life in Chicago as required by the program. However, in 1928, tragedy struck. A fire destroyed much of the small Montana town, including the school where Helen worked and several homes, including the one where Helen and Thomas lived. The local records from that time were incomplete, but witness accounts suggested that Helen died trying to save children from the burning school. Thomas, now 15, disappeared after his mother's funeral. Some accounts suggested he tried to return to Chicago to find Margaret, but he never arrived. Other accounts said he might have been taken in by a farming family in a neighboring state, but no official records existed to confirm this. The federal agents who had arranged Helen's move were assigned to other cases, and the informal witness protection program was eventually stopped. Helen and Thomas Morrison's files were classified and forgotten, leaving Margaret to search for Helen and Thomas Henderson, people who no longer officially existed. The investigation took an unexpected turn when Dr. Webb discovered additional markings on the photograph that had been invisible before. Using special ultraviolet lighting, he found faint writing on the back of the photograph in what appeared to be Thomas's handwriting. For Margaret, if you find this, look for the teacher in Big Sky Country. The code will lead you home. TH 1925. Emily immediately understood the importance. Big Sky Country was a nickname for Montana, and Thomas had left his sister a clue about where they went. But Margaret had never seen this message because it was only visible under special lighting that didn't exist when she was searching for her family. Sarah and Emily decided to follow Thomas's trail to Montana. Working with local historians in the town where the 1928 fire happened, they discovered something remarkable. The local cemetery had a small memorial section for victims of the fire, and among the names was Helen Morrison, beloved teacher. But there was no grave for Thomas. However, their research uncovered a local legend about a young man who had arrived in the area in the late 1920s, claiming to be looking for his sister in Chicago. Local families had helped him, and he eventually settled in the area, taking the name Tom Rivers. Tom had become a respected member of the community, working as a teacher like his mother and raising a family of his own. The breakthrough came when they found a photograph in the local historical society's collection. It was a 1950 school photo showing Tom Rivers with his students. Despite 35 years of aging and a different name, Emily could see he looked like the 12-year-old boy in the 1925 photograph. The final pieces of the puzzle fell into place when Sarah and Emily found Tom Rivers' family still living in Montana. Tom had died in 1987, but his son Michael Rivers was still alive and living on the family ranch. When Emily called Michael and explained who she was, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. "My father talked about his sister Margaret his entire life. Michael finally said, his voice thick with emotion. He never stopped hoping she would find it. He kept that photograph you found hidden in a secret part of his desk. He said someday his sister would understand the code and come looking for it. Emily learned that Tom had indeed tried to return to Chicago in 1928 after Helen's death. But he was a 15-year-old boy with no money and no proof of who he was. By the time he could have made the trip, he worried that too much time had passed and that Margaret might have moved on with her life. He made the difficult decision to build a new life in Montana while always hoping Margaret would somehow find him. The most emotional discovery came when Michael showed Emily a box of items his father had kept his entire life. Letters he had written to Margaret but never sent, photos of his family that he hoped to share with her someday, and a detailed explanation of the code on his pin written out clearly so that Margaret could understand their story if she ever found the 1925 photograph. As Emily held these precious items, she realized that Margaret and Thomas had been searching for each other their entire lives. They were separated by circumstances beyond their control, but they never forgot their love for each other. The photograph that had started as a simple family portrait had revealed a story of love, sacrifice, and the unbreakable connections between family members, even across time and distance. Margaret had died just 2 years before Emily would discover the truth, but Emily knew her grandmother would have been overjoyed to learn that Thomas had lived a good life, that he had never forgotten her, and that their mother, Helen, had died a hero, saving children's lives. The photograph, once analyzed by experts, had finally given the answers that Margaret had searched for nearly a century.